Wayne Skellington is here to read Bunnicula, Nighty Nightmare. If you want to follow along with more amazing readings, always remember to like and subscribe. Now I think that the little zookeeper will be perfect to join us for today's adventure. Now that the little zookeeper is here, let's jump in. Once upon a time in Transylvania, Chester took a moment to bathe his tail. Howie Dog and I settled down on our bed of pine needles and leaves and waited. The air that ruffled our hair and rustled the trees above us was changing, perhaps in anticipation as well. Though anticipation of what, I couldn't say. When Chester was ready to begin, he assumed the classic cat position. High head, spine erect, front legs as straight and formal as marble columns, and wrapped his freshly laundered tail around himself, leaving only the tip in motion. For a time it flicked the ground, then slowly it quieted. The story began. Once upon a time in Transylvania, Chester said, high in the Carpathian mountain, a little town called Kasavanshiks, there lived twin brothers whose names were Hans and Fritz, the simple sons of the innkeepers. Their lives were simple, I ventured. Free from care, said Chester, free from worry, until that fateful day when everything changed. Wash up for dinner, their mother told them, as she did every night before the evening meal. Going, Mummy, said Fritz, the more obedient of the two. Take your brother with you, she said. Well, sure, Howie put in. After all, you don't want dirty Hans at dinner. Chester sighed deeply and continued. They were just going outside to the Vale when they heard a crash. Rushing back in, they found their mother lying in a heap on the floor. Mummy! Fritz cried. This Fritz is a real wimp, Dog muttered. I tended to agree, though I said nothing. Is she dead? Said Hans. No, Fritz told his brother, but I think she's had a relapse. Oh, Hans, you know what we were told last time this happened. There is only one doctor, a doctor in far-off London who can cure her. What were we to do? We are poor children of poor innkeepers. So few people pass by this way. It will take us years to save enough money to go to London and get help. And Mummy doesn't have years, Fritz began to cry. Feeling her son's teardrops on her lips, the woman blinked her eyes open. Is that you, Stefan? She said. Hans and Fritz looked sadly at each other. Mummy, you know that Papa is gone, said Fritz. Then to his brother he whispered, the disease has already affected her mind. Their mother smiled wistfully. I remember now, she said. He's gone to wash for dinner. Fritz manly choked back his tears. That's right, he said. Oh, Hans, yet we can hope. We must do something in our power to help Papa save Mummy. There's only one way I know of, said Hans. He exchanged a look with his brother, who nodded solemnly. And so it was the next morning. Hans and Fritz secretly ripped off a corner page from the newspaper and set off in search of Diabolicus. Who's that? Howie asked. Dr. Emile Alphonse Diabolicus, Chester went on to explain, was the subject of the talk, an object of fear in the town of Kasavanshiks. He lived in an ancestral home, a decaying castle high up on the mountain bluff, and was never seen by day and only rarely by night. Some say he was a mad doctor, engaged in research, playing God. Others called him the devil's apprentice, but no one knew for certain what went on in the castle on the bluff. His housekeeper, who came into the town each week to buy food, didn't engage in idle conversation, and none of the peasants were brave enough to venture up the mountainside to find out the truth for themselves. In fact, were it not for an unassuming little ad in the local paper, Hans and Fritz would have never known about the money-making opportunity they were about to pursue. Top bucks for research assistants, the ad read. Inquire at the house of Dr. E.A.D. I shuddered. The house of dread, I asked Chester. The house of Dr. Emile Alphonse Diabolicus, he replied. It was Hans whose hands lifted the heavy knocker on the door. For once there, Fritz was ready to turn back. Courage, Hans said as the door creaked open. With eyes of an eagle and nose of a hawk, the housekeeper looked down at the boys. What do you want? She said. We've come about the odds, said Hans. There was a roll of thunder, even though it was a sunny day. Thank the powers that be, the old woman exclaimed, clutching her withered hands to her chest. You've arrived just in time. Come in, lads, come in. She put Hans and Fritz to work that very afternoon, and they continued to work each afternoon for the next 2 weeks. But in all that time, they never met Dr. Diabolicus. They followed the instructions of the housekeeper, who called herself Erda, and were paid promptly at the end of each day when they delivered to her what it was that they had been sent out to find. What? Dog said. What were they sent out to find? I noticed that he seemed more wide awake than ever. I was beginning to wonder if Chester's little story would put him to sleep by midnight, but I confess I almost didn't care. I wanted to hear the rest of the tale myself. Yeah, Chester, I said. What were they looking for? A twinkle came to Chester's eyes. Rabbits, he said. Rabbits, Howie exclaimed. What did he want rabbits for? That was what Hans and Fritz were asking themselves. It seemed that Dr. Diabolicus couldn't get enough rabbits. The ad in the paper said research assistants, Han pointed out one day, so he must be using the bunnies for research. But what kind of research? much? Oh, said Fritz, I don't want to know. We're getting paid, isn't that enough? We'll soon have enough money to buy our passes to London. That's all that matters. But it wasn't all that mattered to Hans. He had always been a more curious child than Fritz. 2 weeks of collecting rabbits for an unseen employer had proved more than he could take. He had to know what had happened to the rabbits once they reached the house of Dr. EAD. Even more pressing was his desire to see the mysterious Dr. Diabolicus himself. Perhaps, he said, trying to reason with his brother, if we were to meet Dr. Diabolicus, we could convince him to let us help in other ways. Then we'd not only have enough money to get us to London, but to return home as well. Well, it was hard for Fritz to argue with that kind of logic, especially since their mother's illness was progressing rapidly. Just the night before, she had boiled a sheepskin coat and called it mutton stew. The guests had not been amused. The brothers agreed that that night they would find a way to sneak into the castle and speak with Dr. Diabolicus directly. Little did they know that the citizens of Kashavarnikas had plans of their own for that evening. Plans that would forever alter the destinies of the Transylvanian twins. An owl hooted, eerily punctuating the pause in Chester's narrative. The light had become still, the air heavy. What happened next, Howie said, his voice sandpapery with fatigue. Did Hans and Fritz find out about why Diabolicus wanted the rabbits? Oh, they found out all right, Chester said. Would that they hadn't. But Hans could not contain his curiosity. Sounds like someone I know, I muttered, thinking of all the trouble Chester's curiosity had gotten me into at one time or another. Chester gave me a look, but chose not to respond. Late that afternoon, they delivered the day's catch as usual he contained. But instead of leaving immediately for home, they asked Erda if they could have a glass of milk. Before answering them, she glanced at the window. Well, all right, she said, but you'll have to hurry. It's almost dark. That's okay, said Hans. We know our way home. That isn't what worries me, said Erna, and she went off to the kitchen. The moment that they had left the room, Hans and Fritz raced quickly up the winding staircase that led to the upper floors of the house. Fritz clutched his brother's shirt tail as they inched their way along the dark hall on the second level. Where are we going? Fritz asked nervously. There, said Hans, pointing to a pool of light spilling out from under a door at the far end of the hall. He hurried along, not wanting to be found by the housekeeper. Despite its heaviness, the door opened easily and soundlessly on well-oiled hinges. The boys were not surprised by what they found inside. The candlelit laboratory was filled with buzzing machines, bubbling beakers, ticking clocks, and rabbits. Cages and cages and cages of rabbits. At least we know they're alive, Hans said. Alive and yet not alive, said a voice well-oiled as the door. It was then that the boys met Dr. Diabolicus. He stood in the doorway, his pale face a shroud of skin of ancient bones, his lips red with life like overripe berries. He wore a silk robe black as night, with a silver moon and star embroidered on the breast pocket. In his white hands he carried 2 glasses of milk. These are yours, I believe, he said, extending them towards the boys. Thank you, sir, said Hans. Stepping forward, he tried to show no fear, while Fritz, who was failing miserably behind him, won't you join us? I don't drink milk, said Dr. Diabolicus. Hans' hand shook as he reached for the glass. Don't be frightened, Dr. Diabolicus said. I'm not angry with you. You're not, said Fritz. Not at all. Without your help, I would have been unable to complete my experiments. His eyes gleamed as he looked around the room. These rabbits are all evidence of my success, he said. They are, like me, alive yet not alive. Hans and Fritz looked at each other, wondering what they meant by that phrase. I've been so lonely, boys, said Diabolicus. But now my lonely days are over. Opening a cage, he removed a pair of rabbits, white with black markings on their back. Bella, he said in Boris, these are my special ones. They will accompany me through eternity and be my friends, my soulmates always. You can understand how much pets mean to someone as lonely as I, can't you, lads? I don't know about Howie and Dog, but I got a little teary at that one. Wherever I go, Diabolicus continued, Bella and Boris shall go with me, and they will never die. Never, never. Hans started to ask about how this could be, when the sound of pounding footsteps drove the thought out of his mind. Hurry, the housekeeper cried as she broke into the room. Hurry, master, they're coming. Get a hold of yourself, woman. Who's coming? The peasants. They're coming with torches. They're crying. The monster must be destroyed. Oh, master, you must leave at once. The fools, said Diabolicus. Don't they realize it's St. George's Eve? The one night of the year I can't be destroyed. But the rabbits, said the housekeeper. You don't know for certain about the rabbits. They could be destroyed. All your research, all your your work, all for nothing. Diabolicus looked wildly around the room. You're right, he said, but we haven't the time to save them all. He hugged Bellis and Boris to him. I'll take these two. They shall be parents of a new breed. Come, we must flee at once. What good fortune that my cousin is no longer using his home in London. Quickly to the secret tunnel. Without a moment's hesitation, Hans said, may we go with you, sir? Fritz grabbed his brother's arms, too shocked to utter a sound. As the noise of the gathered crowd grew louder and louder outside the walls of the castle, Diabolicus considered the lad's request. I don't see why not, he said after a while. We'll be a family, he said. A family forever. Follow me. As the boys ran after Dr. Diabolicus and his housekeeper, Fritz whispered hoarsely to his brother, are you crazy? What's gotten into you? I'm not crazy at all, said Hans. We're going to London. Yes, thought Fritz, as he boarded the black coach drawn by black horses. We're going to London, but will we return? The moon was now high in the sky. It would be midnight soon, and Dog was wide awake. Oh wow! Looks like the story is getting very interesting with Chester, Howard, and Howie. What do you think, little zookeeper? I like that part too. We'll see you in the next adventure, okay? We'll see you in the next adventure, here with Wayne Reads. I am Wayne Skellington, the new king of Halloween, and I can't wait to see you on the next adventure. Bye-bye!